All right, Mr. Garza, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I'm Magistrate Garwood. I'm going to be handling your case today. Before we get too far into your case, 2 bits of housekeeping. First of all, we're doing this hearing by Zoom. If something happens that you can't hear or see me, let me know right away. Otherwise, I will assume our connection's working just fine. Secondly, the courthouse is closed to the public. The public has the right to hear and see what's happening here in the courtroom. So all of our cases are being broadcast live on our YouTube channel. When we are done here today, everything's going to come off of the YouTube channel. Do you understand?
Yes.
Very good. Then we are going to proceed. This is case SPD 23-4042. Mr. Garza, tell me your full and complete name for the record.
Barry Lee Garza.
So yeah, technically it came off their YouTube channel, but not mine, because there was like half a dozen of us watching it. And I really think everybody should see this total piece of human garbage and what he did and know that evil exists in the world, and this is it. So I'm going to show you the whole story, since they flashed it up there for, 5 whole minutes and then deleted it. Like, that's supposed to be enough for the people to understand the court system.
Thank you. And Mr. Garza, I want to advise you of your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, the court will refer you to the local appointing authority for them to make investigation as to representation. You also have the right to a probable cause conference within 14 days of today and a preliminary examination within 21 days. And you have the right to a trial. Do you understand your rights as I've explained them to you, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. I will have Mr. Bellinger from the Public Defender's Office assist you today, and then I'll sign the order referring you to the local appointing authority upon presentation thereof. With that, we will proceed with appearances by counsel. We will start with the people. Ms. Blanche?
Jessica Blanche, appearing on behalf of people.
Thank you. Good morning. Mr. Bellinger, you're muted.
Of course I am. Apologies, Your Honor. Assistant Public Defender Jay Bellinger appearing with and on behalf of Mr. Garza, who appears via Zoom from the jail. Your Honor, with regard to the charges, we would waive a formal reading and stand mute at this time.
Of course, they're not going to read the charges into the record. So let me give you the backstory. Or rather, let the Detroit News give you the backstory.
An unbelievable morning and day here in Saline. Now, earlier today, when that call went out to police, it went out as an active shooter at the assisted living home facility behind me. So you can imagine that police response when you hear active shooter in such a vulnerable population. And ironically, police officers in the area, they were doing an active shooting drill at Saline High School. They all came here to this area at Woodland and Maple in Saline, quickly realizing the actual shooting scene was this parking lot, a UAW hall right across the street from the assisted living facility. And sadly, a 40-year-old woman, an employee of that facility, had come out for a smoke break, walked over here with a friend when she was ambushed by an ex-boyfriend who she had a personal protection order against.
It's not common for our 911 lines to just keep going off and going off.
Very unusual in sleepy Saline to hear active shooter from 911 dispatchers. Even more alarming, right across the street from the Linden Square assisted living facility.
Thankfully, we were actually doing a training exercise for active shooter over at the Saline High School, which is in Pittsfield Township. So we had a lot of cooperation very quickly.
Police presence like some have never seen in this area raced to the facility and the UAW hall across the street on Woodland Road near Maple. Around 11:30 Thursday morning, a 40-year-old woman who is an employee of the facility apparently walked outside with a friend for a smoke break at the UAW hall.
When she was walking across the street with another male acquaintance, the suspect was waiting and just started opening fire.
She was shot multiple times by the suspect, an ex-boyfriend who she has a personal protection order against. She's in critical condition, and the friend she was with, a 55-year-old man, is stable. The shooter drove off, crashing head-on into this yellow SUV 2 miles from the scene.
I was just inside and I heard the loud crash, and then I heard people shouting.
A good Samaritan stopped the shooter from getting any further, blocking him in with his SUV, and the cops, they were right there.
A bunch of sheriff, police from Pittsfield, Saline, the state trooper, they all came rushing down, and they came out with weapons drawn and told me to get in the house.
They made the arrest, recovering the accused shooter's weapon.
I actually saw the police officer tase the man and subdue him and then wrap him up, tie him up so he couldn't move.
Thank you. Mr. Garza, I'm not going to go through the details of the complaint with you because you've had a chance to review that information with your attorney, and he's indicated that you are going to waive formal reading. He has you standing mute. That means you'll remain silent as to the charges. I will enter a plea of not guilty on your behalf. I will schedule you for your next court date. That will be a probable cause conference. That will be in front of Judge Simpson on August 17th at 9 a.m. or as soon thereafter as your case can be called. That will be by Zoom. We will send you a notice to appear and you will receive additional information from the public defender's office. Do you understand?
Yes.
Very good. The next thing we'll need to address in this matter is bond. There are two parts to bond. Bond conditions, those are things the court tells you you can and cannot do. If you violate a bond condition, you're subject to immediate arrest. The other side of bond is whether you can be released today on your own personal recognizance or whether you'd have to post a bond in order to be released. Before I make any decisions regarding bond or bond conditions, I will hear from Ms. Blanche if she wishes to be heard. I will hear from Mr. Bellinger on your behalf. I do have a written request from law enforcement and the prosecutor. Additionally, I did have a chance to hear testimony from the Saline Police Department regarding what allegedly took place on the day in question, August 3rd. All of that information goes into my evaluation. You'll get a copy of your conditions when we are done today. Ms. Blanche, would the people like to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. This defendant's been charged with 1 count of open murder, 1 count of assault with intent to murder, and 1 count of felony firearm. The female victim in this case had a PPO, which was granted on 7/28, but had not been served on the defendant. He showed up to her work, shot her in the neck, and then shot a male victim who was near her. He got into his car and fled from the scene and police. He purposefully crashed his car into another vehicle, which ended the flee. He made terrible statements on the scene, which showed his intent, like, "I'm not sorry I killed that fucking bitch." Based on the charges, the fact that this defendant is an absolute threat to this community, and the fact that he's a flight risk, we're asking for you to deny the bond. Thank you.
This is absolutely a horrendous case. This poor woman was at work in the parking lot doing nothing, and her psycho ex comes up and shoots her. What is wrong with people?
Well, an update now. We've learned a woman has died after being shot today in Saline. It happened outside the Linden Square assisted living facility. The female victim and a friend were walking across the street to apparently take a smoke break when they were ambushed. The woman was shot several times. Her friend also hit. We're told the suspect is the woman's alleged ex-boyfriend, a man she had a personal protection order against. The shooter drove off and crashed head-on into an SUV before a Good Samaritan blocked his path. Police were then quickly able to get to the scene and take him into custody.
When she was walking across the street with another male acquaintance, the suspect was waiting and just started opening fire. Thankfully, we were actually doing a training exercise for active shooter over at the Saline High School, which is in Pittsfield Township. So we had a lot of cooperation very quickly.
Tonight, the woman's friend, a 55-year-old man, is listed in stable condition.
Thank you. Mr. Bellinger.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Garza. Your Honor, understanding the provisions of 6.106 B1A,
It's probably a little hard to read here, but Rule 6.106 is pretrial release. B1 says the court may deny pretrial release to A defendant charged with I, murder or treason. He's charged with murder. Denied.
I understand that this court has the right to deny a bond in this matter. We would be asking for some sort of monetary bond here so that he may start accruing some sort of credit. I understand that these are life terms with a max. However, if for some reason there are defenses here, we would just ask that he'd be able to start accruing some credit while he is in. So just any sort of monetary amount we would be asking.
I'm sorry, but this beautiful woman needlessly lost her life for no reason, all because that guy is an absolute piece of garbage. So he deserves nothing.
Thank you. Anything further, Ms. Blanche?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. So, Mr. Garza, I know you had a little bit of time to talk to Mr. Bellinger. I want you to understand and want the record to be clear. Under the Michigan Court Rules, Section 6.106B1, the court may deny pretrial release to a defendant if they are charged with murder or treason, and continues on with various other matters in that court rule. I'll be honest, I'm not particularly concerned whether you're getting credit for your time in jail.
Most of you probably know what they're talking about, but for those of you who don't, when you go to sentencing, you get time knocked off your total sentence for whatever time you sat in jail prior to sentencing. This guy's probably not going to have a trial for months, if not years, depending on how much research and back and forth goes into it. So they're talking about giving him credit for it. The thing that I'm not quite getting is him not getting credit if he doesn't get a bond, which I've totally heard them talk about in courts before, specifically in the Washtenaw County courts, in the district court and Judge Simpson's. I pulled up the Michigan Code of Criminal Procedure 769 Section 11B, and it's credit time served prior to sentence, lack of bond. And it says, whenever a person is hereafter convicted of a crime within the state and has served any time in jail prior to sentencing because of being denied or unable to furnish bond for the offense of which he is convicted, the trial court in imposing sentence shall specifically grant credit against the sentence for such time served in jail prior to sentencing, which is basically saying he gets credit even if he's denied bond. So I'm trying to figure out what superseded that in order to prevent him from getting credit, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So if anybody happens to know that, send it over to me because I'm very interested to know.
I heard the testimony from the police department regarding what allegedly took place on the day in question. Someone has died. Perhaps there's some defense, but quite honestly, at this point with the information presented to me, I can't imagine what that would be. In addition to the loss of life of Ms. Thomas, there was another individual who could have died as well. And then we have the following then a flee, and then a car crash where another person was injured, and then another attempt to flee. I don't see any reason to do a cash bond over a denial of bond, a large cash bond over a denial of bond. I don't think there's any viable, reasonable cause for me to do that. I just don't find that to be justified in any way. This is a devastating case. So I am going to deny bond outright according to the court rule that I have just cited, and no bond will be set. You will be held until your next court date, which again is your probable cause conference, August 17th at 9 a.m.
Fox News' Jessica Dupnack is live now with the very latest. And what else could have been done in the situation, Jessica?
Unfortunately, she was doing everything right. As you said, Taryn, we knew that the victim, Amber Thomas, had a personal protection order against her ex-boyfriend, the accused shooter in all of this. But we learned today that that was granted by a Lenawee County judge just 6 days before the shooting. Now, police have not said much in the way of a motive definitively, but it is very possible that that accused shooter being served with that PPO could have set him off and led to the shooting. A family in mourning at the death of 40-year-old Amber Jo Thomas, murdered across the street from her work in Saline, the Linden Square assisted living facility. Thursday morning, she went to her car with a coworker. That's where police say her ex-boyfriend was waiting with a gun. The 58-year-old man opened fire on her and the coworker. He is okay. Amber died later that day at the hospital. The facility where she worked releasing this statement to us, saying they're deeply saddened by her death and that over the course
course of her time at Linden Square, Amber Thomas was a dedicated employee. She always put the residents first, and many of her coworkers looked at her as a mentor. It turns out Amber had a personal protection order against her ex, approved by a Lenawee County judge less than a week before the shooting.
This is just a piece of paper. If this person is determined to hurt you, he or she will likely try to do it anyway.
Former Macomb County Circuit Court Judge Carl Marlinga was in charge of granting PPOs during his time on the bench.
Remember, when it's served, a person who is already unhinged, who is already a threat, might go the other way. It might cause a person to go off the deep end.
Unfortunately, he says, it's the only judicial recourse someone like Amber could take, and they're not always granted.
It has to be a credible threat, evidenced by some type of overt act.
A PPO serves as a warning to stay away, but with that can come a false sense of security.
Don't do anything on the assumption that this piece of paper is ultimately going to save you from a very violent person.
So let's break that down a little bit. A PPO or TPO, or a dozen other names, a protective order in any acronym that they used for it, isn't going to protect you. I mean, unless the person is, outside your house when they're not supposed to be, and you can get them in trouble for that. But actual physical danger, if they're intent on hurting you, they're probably going to do it whether or not you have that piece of paper. So the main purpose it serves is getting them in more trouble when they break it. And the only way to protect yourself is to actually protect yourself with some form of violence, I guess. What other way is there? Unless you go into hiding, which isn't going to do anything because they're not going to be convicted of anything until they actually hurt you or try to hurt you. So what do? You get a gun and they come after you, and you have to be quick enough and know how to use it enough to shoot them, and it has to be justifiable or else you go to jail. So I guess the lesson here is pre-screen for crazy before you hook up with someone. I really don't know how you can survive a situation like that. Maybe a bodyguard? It's really frustrating for women who have psycho exes that are intent on killing them, and they really have no protection. And it's sad and frustrating and scary as hell.
Just in case, I am still going to set bond conditions. And it's important that you understand your bond conditions and you comply with your bond conditions. Just in case, I am still going to set bond conditions. And it's important that you understand your bond conditions and you comply with your bond conditions. You are, and I appreciate some of these are irrelevant while you're sitting in custody, but I'm going to set them all now in case there's some kind of change in the future. You're not allowed to use alcohol, illegal drugs, or marijuana. You're not allowed to leave the state of Michigan while your case is pending. You're not to purchase or possess any firearms, ammunition, or dangerous weapons. You are not to be with anyone in possession of any firearms, dangerous weapons, or ammunition. You are not to assault, harass, intimidate, beat, molest, wound, or threaten anyone. You are to have no contact with any immediate member of Amber Thomas's family. You are to have no contact with Nancy Thomas. You are to have no contact with Richard Edwards. You are to have no contact with any immediate family members of Richard Edwards. You are not to go to any home, work, school, house of worship of Richard Edwards, Nancy Thomas, or any immediate family members of any of those individuals. And I just want to clarify when we talk about no contact, because you'll likely have the ability to potentially access email, have phone access, potentially be able to see people, have visits while you're in the jail. You cannot direct anyone to be in touch with any of the people I have said you can have no contact with on your behalf. You cannot have access to people by phone, email, telephone, any kind of internet or social media, no writing to anyone. No contact means no contact. And certainly if it's found that you have any contact with any of those individuals, any privileges that you have at the jail, telephone and such, they can certainly be revoked. Again, you're to commit no crimes while your case is pending. All of your conditions, they will exist whether you're in custody or out of custody and remain in full force and effect until changed by the court. Ms. Blanche, anything else we need to address in this matter?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Bellinger, anything else we need to address in this matter?
I do not believe so, Your Honor. I'm just checking through my notes real quick, if you don't mind.
That will just make sure. Mr. Garza, do you have any questions for the court?
No, ma'am.
All right.
We have nothing, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, very good. Upon presentation of the order referring Mr. Garza to the local appointing authority, I will sign that. You may have already sent it. I just don't have it yet. And with that, this case is done. Mr. Garza, you can stand up and go to the door to let the jail staff know that you are done. We'll get your paperwork to you later today. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Blanche.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The accused shooter who ambushed his ex-girlfriend in Saline this week faces a judge for the first time. And new details come out in court about what he said to police as they arrested him. Take a look.
Perhaps there's some defense, but quite honestly, at this point with the information presented to me, I can't imagine what that would be.
For the first time, we're seeing the accused shooter who allegedly murdered his ex-girlfriend Amber Jo Thomas this week in Saline. 58-year-old Barry Garza in court Saturday, charged with open murder, assault with intent to murder, and felony firearm.
He showed up to her work, shot her in the neck, and then shot a male victim who was near her. He got into his car and fled from the scene and police. He purposefully crashed his car in another vehicle, which ended the flee.
This was the aftermath of that scene Thursday morning at a UAW Hall parking lot across the street from Amber's work, the Linden Square Assisted Living Facility in Saline. After the shooting, Garza allegedly drove off, purposely crashing his car 2 miles from the scene. Washtenaw County Sheriff's deputies quickly made an arrest.
He made terrible statements on the scene, which showed his intent, like, "I'm not sorry I killed that f***ing."
Investigators say Amber was doing everything right to get away from Garza, who has a history of assault and domestic violence convictions.
The female victim in this case had a PPO, which was granted on 7/28, but had not been served on the defendant.
Magistrate Tamara Garwood said Saturday the focus should be on the loss of life, not on if Garza is getting credit for time served, which he apparently asked about in open court.
I don't see any reason to do a cash bond over a denial of bond, a large cash bond. I am going to deny bond outright.
This piece of garbage will be in front of Judge Simpson, probably repeatedly for quite a while, with pretrial conferences and exams and everything else. So I will follow them and bring you updates as they come. Until next time, see you then.